they're splitting ESCOM into 3 microservices: generation, transmission, and distribution. So I think we won, hey? Microservices everywhere. You guys had lunch? I had lunch. If I'm standing up after lunch, you standing up after lunch. Isn't that stand up? I got the shit spot of Friday afternoon after lunch, so you stand up. If you can't see, I'll help you sit just now. So, it's like not my first Rubyfuza, but I was here with the very first one. And there's lots of new faces here, and I'm feeling a bit old. So if you started writing code, not just Ruby, and you were getting paid for it like a job, and you started like within the last 5 years, sit down. If you started your job as a developer in the last 5 years, sit down. In the last 10 years. Okay. In like early noughties. Hey, Daniel. Late 90s? 1995. Cool. All right, I started in 92. That's why I'm feeling too damn old. So, anyway. So I have an issue with the organizers of Rubyfuza because I put this talk up as a submission, and then they started tweeting like I'm going to tell people hard truths and stuff like that. And that's how they build this whole thing. So we'll talk after about this. But here's the disclaimer. If you can't handle the truth, so what the hell? When I've seen a truth table of equality in any language, the diagonal is complete, guys. Come on, folks, the diagonal is complete. What's happening at that bottom quadrant? What the heck is happening? Like, array 0 is not equal to array 0. I don't know how you guys, okay, that's why there's TypeScript. Brendan, you came in late. When did you start writing code? 1994. Yes, you got paid for it. Wow, okay, I am the damn old one here. All right, so the reason for this talk, last year I spoke at Agile Africa conference in 2018, right? And I did this talk and I called it Agile Rabbit Holes, and I have this love-hate relationship with the Agile community, and I think it's reciprocal, but that's fine. I did this talk, and I spoke about the things that we just constantly trip and fall into and we find it difficult to get out of. I don't want to repeat the talk, but there's a few things in there, like there's this thing about safety, like it must be safe for everyone to fail and learn, but then there's no consequences, so we're not critical of failure, and so we don't learn. So that was one. You quit or you continue for the wrong reasons. So like, even though most of the people who have written code in the last 5 years or started then, I guarantee you some of you have been on a death march, right? You know what I'm talking about, right? It's like that ridiculous timeline that no one believes in, but you still go there, and then like lemmings off a cliff, right? And then in large enterprises particularly, there's a tolerance for mediocrity, and then and then this producing and consuming lies I spoke about. I had the title that says it's unbelievable, but actually it was about lies. It's like you agreed to a ridiculous deadline, and no one, like after that planning, like we all go back and the cigarettes and like, yeah, that's never gonna work, eh? Right? So that was that part. And then denying and ignoring ignorance, like we actually really don't know what the hell is going on, but yeah. And then this thing of unicorns chasing rainbows and stuff like that. But anyway, I don't want to go into that too much. You can find the thing somewhere online. But after that, I kind of was feeling a bit ambivalent, and then on Facebook, I put the slides up and I said, hey, this is probably my last talk at an Agile conference, but here you go, take it. And a friend of mine, Marcus Anve in Stockholm, picked up on that, and he did this. The Agile Manifesto, which says that we have unsuccessfully tried to teach people Agile for a long time. Through this work, we have come to value sleeping well at night over pretending to deliver value, personal integrity over having an Agile certification, XP over Scrum, anything really over scaled Agile. And that is why people believe the items on the right have value. There's really none whatsoever, and we can't be bothered anymore, so we're back to coding. So he did this as tongue-in-cheek, right? And then after a while, it got some heat on Twitter, and people like poking him on Twitter and so. The thing is that it was done in jest. But there's an incredible amount of hard messaging in there. And it's not unusual. And this is actually the actual page in Times Roman Web 0.4 version of the web static page that's served from GitHub or something. But there's something about this that's important. And I said, okay, what's the follow-up to this thing? And I said, okay, let's try this with you guys, and you guys are all developers. So I thought about it since last year, August to now, which is like 4 internet years or something, or 1 sprint for some companies, half a release maybe. So I've noticed a few things since 1992. There's an increasing distance between developers and the customers. That gap seems to be getting wider. Some people are managing to keep it pretty close, but in general, it feels like from back then to now, that gap is spreading. And keeping what you understand about your customers further away is starting to let in non-uniform design. And I'm finding more and more solutions that are more complex than the problem they're trying to solve. You know what I'm talking about, right? You've got these tangled class hierarchies, and this calls that, and Kafka, and Kubernetes, but ignoring the infrastructure, the actual code is like you can't pull this out because it pulls all of that other stuff, and that's a sign that it's probably more complex than the domain. And then it surfaces. I'm thinking like, how does it even get there? Because nobody wakes up in the morning and says, today I'm going to go and really screw up that code base. And then you go home and to your dear one and say, how did you do today? Aslam, you have no idea that pull requests are sent through it. You have no idea. Whoa, you're going to see them pull that one off, right? Like, no one does that, right? We mean good, right? But it doesn't surface like shitty code and bad pull requests. It surfaces in the fact that, and just think about your own work, right? There'll be ambiguity in conversation. It's like, I'll speak to someone and they'll say, I think they know what I'm talking about, but actually the word is overloaded, or the sentence or the phrase is overloaded. And now? Okay. And then we have divergence of thoughts. It pulls in different directions, and then there's prolific miscommunication. And those moments in an iteration where you're writing some code, and say, oh shit, is that what they meant? Ah, hell. And then it's like, undo, try again. And then we hide this mess behind what I call CDF, which is certificate-driven flow, right? Which is an absolute ritualization. We will stand up, and we'll do the stand-up at 8:15 for 15 minutes, even if we've got nothing to share. And we'll do planning because of planning, and we'll do estimation because they said we must do estimation. And it goes on and on and on like that, and we actually give up thinking, right? And that's not the flow that we're looking for. And so these things bother me, right? And maybe it doesn't, maybe you're the complete wrong audience. If you are, I'll stop now and grab more coffee. But there's things behind this which I've tried to do, and some of it, I felt I've had some success. The issue with this kind of thing is that we end up normalizing deviant behavior. We do it so often, it becomes the norm. So when we do meaningless stand-ups, etc., and meaningless estimations, it becomes the norm. It's like, why do we do it? Because we do it. And it doesn't matter, we'll just do it, right? And then whether you're doing story points or some other kind of cabbages and apples and whatever sizing, you'll make the thing that you need to deliver in that 2 weeks fit into that iteration, no matter what, right? But we normalize that kind of behavior, and it's a deviant behavior. It's not the right thing to do, right? And the question I ask myself is, how come we struggle to do the right thing? How come? And this bothers me. And the response is not, we are software artists, okay? Artists are important to the world. They make us reflect on ourselves and the world. An artist is a creative endeavor, right? And it's in response to a feeling about self or state of the world. I actually was in an organization where this one guy in some workshop we're doing threw a complete frothy and says, we are the creatives and we are the most intelligent people in the room. It's like, whoa, guy, calm down, you know. But that's the thing. Engineering, on the other hand, which is what I think we do, is a creative endeavor, and it's in response to a known problem. We saw a problem in the world and we need to fix it. Right. Unless you are genuinely writing code because of your feelings, I'll retract this. So I'm yet to see and read code or write code based on my feelings. That like, I'm feeling a little bit down today, therefore I'll write code like this. And I've never read code that was inspired by a feeling, like an emotion. I've read code that has caused emotions in me, but not the other way around, right? So I'm going to talk about 4 things. And shout out to a few people because I had a talk set yesterday, and today I rewrote it based on conversations I've had at Rubyfuza yesterday. So like Fritz and Wilhelm and Brendan and a few other people, it's just like, you made me redo my work today. So thank you for that. I hope it's better for that. So I'm going to talk about 4 things, and I'm calling it things because I don't know what other name to give, because naming is damn hard, right? So 4 things. And these are themes that came up in the last 24 hours and probably before, and I think it's the right ones to talk about. One is that I call it about making space. Okay, and I'll go to each one. And if we make space, it leads to a protection of conceptual integrity, and you'll see frictionless collaboration, and we shift from probably a controversial thing, costly reuse and maintain, to cheaper rip and replace. I'm going to go through each one. Make space. What do I mean by that? Most teams I work with are sitting with a sprint backlog or something of stickies on their shoulders, and it weighs them down. Like there's this invisible weight that comes from chasing features. It's like you've got to get that feature out the door no matter what, and the intention is right, okay? But it's probably far too much than what is useful, okay? And there's a ripple effect on this. We need to create space by stop chasing and cramming features into sprints, because we need space to actually solve the incredibly unique and hard problems that are unique to you. I'm not saying write a framework like Rails for everyone. That's a problem for the whole world. But you have a unique problem that you need to solve. And we need space because you don't get continuous delivery for free. You don't get automation for free. If you think about the amount of effort you have put in to get automation with continuous delivery, well, I'm talking about automate everything. You trend towards getting better and better. So there's no done with those types of things. There's getting better. You need to make space for that. And you also need to protect your product, which I'll talk about just now. Now, the thing that I've noticed has been lost is that we have a few genuinely unique problems, and the reality of that is that they're unique. It's a problem for us, not for the whole world, right? And so we've lost along the way this culture of toolsmiths. We have feature smiths, people who write features. But we've lost that little edge of writing that little piece of code that actually automates this thing, that parses that file and spews that out, and it's useful for everyone in the team. We kind of like gloss over that, and some of it happens like accidentally, and that's fantastic, but we're not deliberate enough about that. And then if you go back to like that Agile Manifesto thing with those people older than me, those people, Martin Fowler, Kent, etc., those were all toolsmiths. There were people who solved problems that were unique to them at that moment in time, and that led to this. And this other thing about making space is that you should only plan when you need to plan. It's like, don't plan because there's a meeting in your calendar and there's nothing to do. You often end up just like wasting your time. And the best time to plan is when you find yourself rushing to catch up, because rushing to catch up is the fastest way to fall behind. What you should be doing is sitting down as a team, face to face, and be very deliberate about what are we going to do now. I know we're behind, what are we going to do? And be realistic about it and be credible about it. Don't come up with, please don't say you're going to get another 10 people on the project or something like that. That doesn't work, right? So we got to make space, and if you don't make space, then you struggle to actually produce stuff that gives you flow. Where you get continually better at it. And there's two paces that I find myself working in, is that I'm slow in thinking. I'm very careful about thinking about stuff, and it's not like days. The episode could be an hour, but I'm very deliberate about doing this debating, and I'm talking to people about my thoughts, right? And then when something starts taking shape, I act fast. And the reason I want to act fast, I want that feedback loop to come back pretty quickly where I confirm or discard the thought. You kind of do that when you're doing TDD, right? In the minutia. It's like, let me try this out. Oh, here's a refactoring move. Shit, broke it, right? Take it away, try this again. You thought of something, you're acting fast. And sometimes when you know those moments when you're trying to lay out a test, and it's like you're just battling your ass off trying to lay out the test, and then suddenly it's like, okay, I think that could work. Then you flip over and you start trying to get it to work. Those things are supported by two things, delivering continuously and learning continuously. Many of you here work in organizations where there's different gradient of people, of experience in the organization. Some people straight out of uni or something coming in. Some people have been there for a while. That thing of learning and delivering at the same time is always in tension, and you've got to make space for that, because delivery will trump learning. When the chips are down, you'll deliver and forsake learning. But those things need to happen, and you have to create space for that to happen. You don't make space, it's not going to happen. You're kidding yourself. Then don't hire junior people and don't worry about their careers. They should go somewhere else. Sounding a bit harsh and very preachy, but anyway. This one I find has been the most important thing in my life in software development, which is conceptual integrity. It comes from this guy, Fred Brooks, who's read Mythical Man-Month essays. Those from the 90s, yeah, put your hands up, right? Okay, cool. If you haven't read the Mythical Man-Month essays and you ignore the religious candor that goes into it, it has lots of truths, okay? And this thing, everyone talks about the don't load people on and blah, 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 but the reality here is it's about, the most important thing is conceptual integrity, and that is that don't mess up the model that's in the mind of the users. I was speaking to people today, I think it was Fritz, where I said, imagine if the next release of Emacs says we're not using meta key. Okay, this room is full of VI people, so. Okay, there's no escape. You don't use escape anymore, right? It messes you up, right? So you rather omit features that have independent, uncoordinated ideas. The weird thing about this, it's not achieved by democracy. So there's this saying that goes, a camel is a horse designed by a committee. Okay. So conceptual integrity comes from the mind of one. If it's a very large body of work, it comes from a very few people. Right. The program manager, and this word I've fished out from a book called Thinking Forth, F-O-R-T, the programming language that's stack-based. It's a 1980-something book. It's fantastic. This is a language you could write in Ruby. And the guy says, the program manager is the one who holds conceptual integrity. It's a custodian and champion. That is that if any feature comes along, and if it breaks conceptual integrity, it's off the table. Or we're going to adjust the model to incorporate it. Those are hard conversations. Here's an example. Now, it sounds dictatorial, and it closes you off. And now, as developers, we've got no freedom to be the creatives. The architecture of a clock. The architecture has conceptual integrity, but the creative freedom to implement it as you want, with numbers, without numbers, all of those things. So it doesn't take you away from a contribution in that sense. Frictionless collaboration is the third one. I know there's Slack and all of these other things. I've just found face-to-face collaboration, face-to-face communication is more reliable than anything else. The number of times I've gotten myself in the shits because I wrote something that was misinterpreted by a nuance of words that upset someone is ridiculous. Unless you're incredibly close to me, you know that I was either taking the piss, or it was a nuance that referred to something else, etc. But those moments where you write a message, even to people in your close circle, and you write a WhatsApp message, it's like then you get the phone call, like, whoa, wait, hold on, what you're talking about. Face-to-face is the best. You know you have frictionless collaboration, frictionless communication, when everyone can have the same response to, this is why we want to do that, and so we're busy with this. If you can't do that, and people are doing different things and you don't know what they're busy with, that's a problem. I ban I told you so in Teams. I ban it. Because I'm prepared to receive, and I'm prepared for everyone to voice their thoughts equally. And you've got to respect and support the decision of the person who's holding conceptual integrity. You've got to respect it. So you can't say, I told you so, and because it gives you the license to like this now, right? Yeah, we'll wait, we'll see. And you've got to have the courage as a leader of a group of people to back out of a decision that just didn't go away they want and put something else on the table and not look like you've got egg on your face, right? And the last thing is you've got to move around. Don't stay in the same seat at the same piece of code. Move around the code base, man. You've got to do that, you know. That's how you learn. This one, the fourth one, rip and replace. The number of times I've sat with teams and they said we're designing for reuse. Open, close, extendable, whatever, etc., etc. And those are useful things. But you haven't even got use yet. It's not being used. Why are you looking for reuse? Like, just make it so it can be used, right? Let's start there. And afterwards, if you're lucky, you might get reuse, right? And the things that are actually reusable are these incredibly generalized frameworks like Rails and Active Record and, you know, those kind of things which are cross-cutting across all domains, right? The probability in your domain of making something reusable is pretty slim. It's pretty slim. And so I tend to drift towards make it useful so we can use it. If I use it once, I win. I'll take the win. The other thing is that the moment you release once, right, you're stuffed because now you have to think differently about how you write code for code that's already in prod, right? So maintenance kicks in the moment you have the first release. And maintenance is really hard. And it's incredibly costly. The older your code base is, the more costly it is, the more effort and care you put into that. Designing for discardable parts of your code base is equally hard because you've got to design to be deprecated, which means it must be disentangleable. You must be able to pull it apart without consequential effects rippling through the entire code base. But in the longer run, it's cheaper. So I opt for designing for rip and replace as opposed to reuse. So I flipped my mental model around. But I was taught about reuse because OO gives you reuse, eh? And everything is reusable. The trick to both, actually, is refactor mercilessly. And I know the word refactor gets used as like write some code behind a test, but it's about keeping functionality and adjusting your design. And you've got to be merciless about that and be continuous about it. It's like if you're asking for permission to refactor, you're doing the wrong thing. Seriously. If you're looking for that refactor sprint, whatever, we're doing it wrong. Like it's part of your flow, right? And it doesn't come from a certificate. So I got this thing from Kent Beck. And it says, for each desired change, make the change easy. Then make the easy change, right? And that's the hard thing to do. So I noticed this. We write code to move data from a database to a user interface and back again. I know I'm being quite simplistic about it. And we integrate with other systems. But we actually move code that moves data from one place to another, and we write code that takes data in one shape and makes another shape. When you think of it in those terms, we're actually thinking about building transformations, pipelines of transformations that shifts data along. Even your controller that takes something in active record, shapes it in some alternative JSON that ends up in some TypeScript NPM disaster on the other side of the network. And yet I find it's still easier to rip and replace parts of a pipeline than it is to disentangle class hierarchies and layers that are glued together and stuff like that. So these 4 things. This is what I'm asking you to care about if you wish to. It's just an ask, and I found it useful for myself. And I find that you get there by being humble, respectful, and courageous. You've got to be incredibly disciplined. You've got to be self-aware. Don't be an entitled. Where's Simon? Like that asshole one he mentioned. Don't abuse your privilege. Be humane. Like, be nice to each other so that you can actually sleep with both eyes closed. Right? So the question I'll leave you with is that, do you care enough about making space, protecting the conceptual integrity of your code and your product, committing to frictionless collaboration, building to rip and replace? And I'll tell you something, if you try it and if you come right with that, you'll find yourself being truly useful. Because the worst thing is to wake up and be not useful in the world. And then you'll find yourself will be a happier person, and people will actually hang out with you. All right, so I'm done. I didn't know it was that amount of time, but it worked. Any thoughts from anyone? Okay, cool. If you forget anything. Yeah, I'm just leaving this because this is the most important slide. Who's that? Who's shouting up? Yeah. I think there's a place for reuse, right? And that is in generalized toolings and extendable tooling and stuff. So that's where you get the reuse, because they're solving generalized problems. But that's at a completely different class of problem that's being solved. So I'm finding more and more on reflection that you're getting reuse from tooling things as opposed to domain-specific things. And in domains, it's pretty hard to find that. But I object to it being a cult because that leads to death. Yes? Yeah, so, there's more to rip and replace than I can talk about in a few minutes, right? But if you're going to rip something out, at least have some contractual agreement to the things that's on either side of it, right? Or around it. And that you're going to protect that with some kind of tests that exist around that. You might have a second-degree knock-on effect that, I'm changing that interface as well, but the things that touch it should actually be then also be dealt with in some ways. The hardest thing is in these types of things is like people will say we need end-to-end testing, but they don't know where the ends are either, right? But in a case like that where you can have localization of ends, like between these 2 parts or 3 parts, and I can wedge a test suite around that, then it's game on. But it's not easy. But it's just, when you start doing that, the consequence of thinking like that is that you go down to genuinely single responsibility. Don't grow your team. I think it comes back to the frictionless collaboration, right? People need to understand this whole thing. I think there's enough of us, as young as we are, as old as we are, where we've built products and systems where suddenly you have this, moly outgrowth like a cancer on your neck because of a feature that was built, and some other person has said, oh, that's brilliant, and it just goes and goes like that. But if you can talk in simple terms to someone about this product does this, and its purpose is that, and has that kind of impact, then you can. And then if you can debate features based on that, yeah. But I think the most successful teams I've worked with have been like handfuls of people. Small teams, but maybe the small useless products as well. So, my first response is serious. Like, grow if you need to grow, but don't grow because it feels like we've got a long backlog. Anyone else? Good. Right. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Bye.